Okay, so we're recording right now. So with the with the exams, for those of you that were impacted, hopefully we can get everything refreshed on the grades for next week. I think there was some questions about the last extra credit. We'll get the extra credit for these sections for next week. And it's one of the same things where it's a non-score practice quiz. So you just have to go in there and just give it a shot, give it a try, and we should be able to give you some credit for your extra credit for the lectures that I'm covering. I think there was also some questions about Excel, which version of Excel and whatnot. So I sent out the link, which is the standard Excel for Rutgers students. And I think there was some question about like some of the functions that are available. And I think if you're only using the web version, you're not going to have the full set of versions. So you should use the Rutgers license to download onto your desktop and use the desktop version of Excel. Okay. So Google Sheets cannot be used for these assignments. It doesn't have the same functionality as Excel. So you want to use the Excel that's available through the Rutgers student license. Okay. If you don't have it, just let me know. I can send you the link again later. The link was also posted out to Canvas and should be out there for Piazza also. Okay, so let's go back and review all of the different Excel functions. So let me share the screen here. Okay, so here we go. So let me over here. So we're going through the spreadsheets here. These are the main topics. I'll just try to run through those, and then I'll try to do some examples here on the sheet that I got set up. So from the beginning, from a few weeks ago, we started with Excel. These are the main things that you should try to focus on and make sure you have in hand before we get to the finals. So you have the relative, absolute cell references, naming ranges. These are the various math functions, at least that what we're covering here. So I'll try to give some examples of these guys. Your functions, these are your standard functions, typical functions. The if statement, if error, the VLOOKUP, these are the finance formulas, subtotals, and then these are like Boolean operators. Some more statistical functions here. You had the various charts, the chart layouts, chart styles. You also have various formatting, conditional formatting. We also have scenario manager. And the last lecture we hit on pivot tables, Excel tables. And we also did some charts off of the pivot tables also. Okay, so those are the main topics and main things you should try to make sure you have in hand before the final. Okay, so in terms of using Excel, these are some typical uses for Excel, but you can use Excel for a lot of different things. So a lot of slicing and dicing with financial information, which I think you see some of that with the assignment 9. You also have inventory, which is also part of your assignment. Various statistics. We didn't do so much in terms of the assignments with project plans or anything like that. But these main ones up here is pretty standard. So you have those in your assignments. You also have basically charts. So with the graphical display of information. The consolidated information, that's really the summary, which we were talking about with the pivot tables. And then you have the scenarios. Okay, so I'm not going to repeat all of these guys here. These are all uploaded, so you can take a look at those on your own time. I'm just going to kind of step back to here and try to walk through some examples of some of these different things here. Okay, so you remember for relative and absolute cell references, what that means is, you remember with the fill, I can drag things like this. So I'll do something simple here. So I just punch a couple numbers in here. Say A and B, and then okay. So one thing I might want to do is I might want to do something between column A and column B. So I would say, let's say, equals whatever's in A, and I'll add B, and you get that. So that's pretty straightforward. And then, as we discussed before, you can just drag it down, and you can see all of these automatically knows to adjust. Right. So the first formula, the first formula, you have C9 plus D9. Right. So that's C9 and D9. And I didn't do anything else except drag this down, and you can see the last one, you can see it's C14 and D14. Right, so it knows to adjust the references basically. But let's say I wanted to take this whole thing and I want to multiply it by some constant. And let's say I want to multiply by that. All right, so that's fine. But now when I drag this down, it doesn't work, right? And the reason being is it took the G, this G column here, and it just assumed that it's going to keep on incrementing it down, right? So here you can see it's G8, and then when I copied it down, it became G9. So that's not what you want. So what you want to do is you want to fix this. So you do that by putting a $sign, and you have to put the $sign in front of both sides. Right, so G and 8, they're both fixing the column and fixing the row by putting the dollar in front of it. Right, so the calculation is still the same, but now when I take it and drag it down, you can see it referred to this constant and kept that the same. So that's what you mean, the difference between relative and absolute cell references. And like I said, you do have the flexibility of fixing a column or a row, or both, okay? So usually when you're talking about relative absolute cell references, this is what you're talking about. So you can do named ranges. We kind of did that before. But let's say I just want to do a cell. So I can do a cell, and I can define a name for that cell. Actually, I don't want to do this one. Let me do the constant one here. So let me do this one, and then I want to define a name for it. Let's say, yeah, we'll just call it constant mult, something like that. And you can see the reference to it up here too. So as you build up like all these different named cells, you'll see that up here too. So one way to refer to this cell is the G8. Another way you could refer to it, let's say equals to, maybe I don't want to do that. Let's just say equals 5 times and that. And you can see it became const mult, which is what I defined that name to be. And I'll leave it at that. So when I look at this formula, instead of calling it G8, it'll refer to it as the constant mult. So as the reference to like the location may change in the future if I insert a column or do whatever, that's okay. And you will not have to remember like what the row column is. And instead, you can just refer to it as this name. And so I did this for one cell, but you could just as easily do it for like a range like this. So I can define a name again also, and I can call it table var, something like that. And again, you can see you have these things defined here. So same thing. So if I wanted to look at something as a table, let's say I want to do a VLOOKUP. So I do a VLOOKUP, and I want to look for a value. And the table array would be here. Oops. And you can see the table var at the top as the reference. Okay, so you can see table var up here. So it works in the same way as what I did with the cell before. Okay. All right, so we had some functions, arithmetic operations here. So let me do a couple of different things here. Clear all this out here. And so you have the typical stuff, plus and minus, divide, multiply, exponent. So let me just do a couple of things here. We'll do and let's do a square here maybe. And we'll do that. That should be it. All right, so do a couple of different things here. One thing that might be useful, if you end up writing a pretty complex formula, you might have a problem for whatever reason. So you might want to do something to break it down a little bit. So I might go into this. Okay, so what this does is it kind of breaks down that formula that I have here. So you have what I did here, you had the addition in the parentheses, then you had the exponent, you squared it, and then you multiplied it. So it's going to evaluate it step by step. So you can see what it did. It took a 3 and it took the 56. Then it did 59. Right, so I added the 56 and the 3. It's going to square it. And then it's going to do the multiplication, which it convert the name const mult equals to this value 5. And then it calculated that. So it broke down each step of the calculation. It's almost like stepping through the calculation for you. So you can watch it, you figure out where your mistake is, if there's an issue, something that's not coming up the way you want. Okay, so that's a useful thing if you end up writing some big formulas in Excel. Okay. The other thing you might want to do is maybe you want to see. You want to show the formula. So the way I mentioned the other class, I think was control caret, but you can do this show formula here. And it basically shows the formulas here. So you might have a spreadsheet with a whole bunch of formulas in here. So instead of trying to click on each one to show the formula, you can show all of them in one shot. Okay, and you can see here it does the control caret to display this also. Okay, you click it on again, you revert back to where you were before. Okay, let me see here if you can do, maybe we do this watch here. So if I do a watch, let me add this. And see here. Okay, so you have this cell, since I had this clicked already. And so you can have like a whole bunch of different watches going on. And let's say I go ahead and change this. You can see it's changing here. So this is only for one cell, so it's not that big of a deal. But you can imagine if you had a whole bunch of these going on in one place, you can see all the numbers changing for you as you play around with these formulas. So you can define these watches in here also. Okay, but I'm going to just delete that for now. Okay. So that covers these, covers the formulas. All right, so if I want to do a sum, average, min, that's pretty straightforward. So I can do equal sum, and I just go through that. All right. And same thing for these others, right? You can do the mod here, right? So a mod would be equals to mod, and let's take that one and that one. You get mod 0, which is what you would expect. You're not going to get a remainder from that. So these are the basic functions here. This is what you would use to build up your formulas. You get a little bit of that in your homework assignment. So this is like the first part that we covered. We did VLOOKUPs, we did if error. So let me do the VLOOKUP again. Don't want to do that. Let me just clear that out. So you remember the VLOOKUP, there was a tricky bit in there in terms of like what it defaults to. What it defaults to is an approximate search, which is most of the time we don't want that to happen. But I'm going to give you an example where you do want that to happen, right? Where you won't expect the exact match. And usually it works with something like this, right? And we did a similar example before where you have pizza count, right? So anywhere from 0 less than 2, you don't get a discount. Anywhere from 2 and less than 5, you get a 10% discount. And 5 to 10, you get the 25, and anything bigger than 10, you'll get like a 40% discount. All right, so we do the lookup. So the lookup value, and I'll probably maybe set this space where I can punch in the number of the pizzas that I want to put in. Oops. And then I want the table array, which is over here. And I want to return the discount. So that'll be column 2. And this is where it will default to approximate match, or if you want the exact match. But in this case, we actually do want the approximate match. So this works fine. Okay. So I punch in 0 pizza, and I don't get a discount. It found the exact match. It found the 0 here. Now what happens if I put in a 1? Okay, so there's no match here, but somehow it's still able to come back with the 0 discount because it does the approximate match. And the way the approximate match works is it knows to go from 0 to 2, it went to 2, it knows that it's never going to find this 1 here. So then it rolls back to this record here. So that's why it will come back with a 0. Now if I go to 2, then you can see it found the 2 and it became 10%. If I go up to 3, same thing. Right? It didn't find it, but it knows to go back to 2 as the best approximation of the value. Same thing for 4, but for 5, it goes to 0.25, which is what you expect. Right? So it found the match and it came back with a 25% discount. For 10, that's fine, you get a 40% discount. So now you're going to go beyond 10, you're going to fall off the table, right? There's nothing else after 10 here. So what happens that I put in an 11, it'll still come back as a 0.4. So it knows that it hit the end of the table, and then it'll come back with the right calculation of 40% on this. Okay, so I think that's the gist of the VLOOKUP. The other part of VLOOKUP, if you want to set it to false, that will come back with the exact match. So that's something to keep in mind if you're using VLOOKUP. A lot of times you have issues with that. I remember when we were doing the VLOOKUP, we also, I actually mixed in this idea of like the if error. So let me try and do that. So let me switch this to false. So now I want the exact match. Let me just do this again. VLOOKUP and hit that. Hit that. 1. All right, good. Okay. Actually, I wanted 2. Okay. So let me clear this out here. And so here, that's fine. All right. So now it's working. All right. So we have the false, which makes it exact match. So when I put in the 1, it doesn't find it. And that's why it comes back with NA. Okay. So now this is where we're going to do the if error. Okay. So if it finds it, it's going to return the value. If it doesn't find it, we want it to say not found, which is what we have here. So let me go back to here. So 0, it found it, that's fine. Punch in 2, it finds it. If I punch in 1, it'll say not found. The other thing that you can do is you can concatenate something to it. So the way you can do concatenation for Excel is to use the ampersand sign. And I can say, this is not found. Like that. Okay, or you can punch in that cell reference. So you can say D3. Okay, so this is kind of useful in terms of debugging when you do a VLOOKUP. If it doesn't find it, instead of coming back with NA, you can have the error message to come back and tell you what it was looking for and it's not found. Okay. All right, so we had different charts and whatnot and formatting. So I'm going to go back to this other sheet here, which is just a sheet of some athletes for the Olympics. Has like 8,000 records or so. So pretty big and typical of what you might see. It tells you the athlete, the age, the country, the year, and whatnot. And then you have your totals here. Don't really need that right now. So maybe the first thing I'll do is just set this up as a table. So table here, you can see table, and I only have to select the one record. And then the table has headers. And kind of defaults it. I like to have this alternating so you can see the records easier. So you can do things like filtering here, sorting the columns and whatnot. You can name the table something. It defaults to table 1, but you can say something like Olympics. Call it like that. So typical type of stuff here. Oops. Should just max down on this, but so here, typically what you want to do with something like this is use subtotals. And the reason why we use the subtotals is because once you do filters, the subtotals will adjust to the hidden records, whereas if you do like a regular sum, it's not going to. And same thing with the other mathematical functions too. So if I go to here, you can see under subtotal, you can see these different things that it does, which kind of just matches up to your regular functions. So you want to use all of these over here and use those instead of the standard functions here. Like I said, mainly because of hidden records. The other thing you want to watch out for, just happens to see it here, these empty sections here. So when I want to go make this a pivot table, it's going to be a problem. So typically, the way I like to look at these things is I try to go through, there's not that many columns, so it's not that big of a deal, but I would just kind of sort it one way and maybe sort it another way. You can see it's like a little bit weird because you have like the blanks that were at the bottom there. So what you really need to do is clear out some of these guys here so you don't have any weird behavior. I'm just going to delete these guys out. And let me make this into a pivot. So I'm going to go to pivot here. So again, you can see because I set this name range to be Olympics, that's what it picked up here. I'm going to set this to be a new worksheet. All right, now you get into here. I guess typically you want to maybe do a country. You want to do a filter on a year maybe. So you drag that here. Maybe I'll do a sport or something here. you see on the left-hand side, you'll see all of the countries. On the right-hand side, you'll see all the different sports, which I guess is a lot. And let me see here. Let me put gold medals here. I don't really want to add up the gold medals. I mean, I don't want to do like a sum. I want to kind of do a count here, I guess. So let me do a count here. Kind of works out the same in this case. Sum and account will be the same thing, should be. You differentiate sum and count if you're doing stuff like we were doing with the financials the other day. Okay. Let me apply a filter. Let me pick a year. Let's say 2012. And you have this breakdown here. So for example, you have Afghanistan here, and it looks like for that year they had one medal. Let's see what that medal was. Okay. Well, yeah, I guess I only came up with the gold medal, right? So that's what I came up with here. Let me click on this one. This has 19. So Australia, looks like Australia had 19 gold medals for that year. So when I double click on it, you can see all of the detail that made up that total there. So I think that pretty much is some of the big things with pivot tables. Let me get rid of this. Go back to here. Let's see if we can do something in terms of a chart with this. So we'll do a chart. Yeah, I guess this looks all right. So we're basically doing a breakdown of all the medals for each of the events. So let's see what this looks like. I guess because there's so many sports, it kind of breaks it down pretty fine, and then by country. So I don't know, this might not be that useful. It's too much detail there. So let me get rid of this guy. And here. Where's the filter here? Okay, so maybe the sports is too much. So let me take the sports out here. So I think this might be a little bit better of a chart. Let's see what that looks like. All right, so we have a lot of countries, but I think this looks like a little bit more reasonable. Not sure if this might look better as a pie chart or not. Yeah, I guess this is probably the best option here. The other day when we did the example with less different options here, I think a pie chart works out pretty well. This one is just too many of them. I don't think a pie chart is going to look good here. So I think doing like this count histogram would be fine. Okay. So when you look at this, you go to here to select data, and then you can play around with these a little bit. So if you want to click on this, I guess you're not going to be able to edit it Um, maybe I can do that. Okay. And let's see, I can change this. So that'll change the counts on me. Flip this around. Okay. So let me see here. Let me go back to Olympic athletes here. All right, so at the table level, I can do the certain level of filtering. In some ways, they kind of overlap between the filtering that you can do here at the top left, like these filters that you can apply here. Here, instead of looking at a summary view to do the filters, you're basically looking at the details to do the filter view. So that's kind of working at two different levels between the Excel table versus the pivot table. Back to here, pulls everything in. And like I said, remember, if you can go over to here, you can drill down into each of these guys. So if I went to Australia here and drill down, you'll go back to the details again. So conditional formatting. So if I go to here, I want to say maybe greater than 5 here. Okay, and then I'm going to copy this all the way down. Just going to leave it at that. See if there's anything that was greater than 5 in here. Yeah. So we had Russia here, greater than 5. So it became the red color here. So there's different things you can play around with, greater than, less than, obviously between, equal to. If you're working with text, you can highlight different things with that. Remember, like if you're referring to text, if you're doing, let's say, a search, you could use the star to sort of do like a wild card. I don't think there's any other things to cover on that. I think that should be it. So I think that kind of covers all of the different things for Excel. Not sure if there's others that people have questions on. But if you do, make sure you let me know. But let me go back out. I'll stop sharing. And I'll just open it up to see if there's any particular areas within Excel that people have questions on. And I'll try to answer that here. If some of you are working on assignment 9, if you have some questions on that, you can let me know also. All right. Well, so if there's no questions about this for Excel, you can wrap up for tonight and just send me any questions that you may have. And I'll see you guys next week.